Part 73. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 721. Rong Chuxiu is not a fool. He may not understand some things at first because he has never tried to understand them. As long as someone gives him a hint, he will soon understand the mystery. However, he still admires the speed of the emperor's intelligence and his style of governing the country, which is completely different from that of previous emperors. This mainly depends on foresight and the dark forces in his hands. The relationship between the emperor and his subjects is about governance. You have to use strategies, you can restrain each other, use the most effective method to balance the forces of all parties, or other ways of control that you feel at ease with. Rong Yu said calmly, for the people, you must be attentive and put the livelihood of the people first, so that the four directions are stable and the people's livelihood is stable. Only in this way can your country be stable and the world be at peace. After a pause, if you care more about your reputation and want to be a wise king, you must not neglect the livelihood of the people. Rong Chuxiu listened carefully and responded respectfully, I will remember the emperor's uncle's teachings in my heart. Rong Yu glanced at him and didn't say anything else. Originally, he just casually mentioned this point and mentioned a few words by the way. He didn't mean to teach him deliberately. The banquet in Guangyang Hall has been set up. The specifications are not too grand, and there are not many officials accompanying him. Rong Yu just sat down at the first seat when Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan arrived. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the two walked calmly to the main seat. After respectfully saluting, Chu Nanyi raised his eyes slightly, I wonder what the master summoned you for. Rong Yu handed him a secret letter, this is the letter from the king to you. Do as it says. You and Mo Lingan can act separately, but don't alert the enemy. Chu Nanyi respectfully took the letter, yes. Go separately from Xiejin. Rong Yu said, this matter is of great importance, so you must be cautious and careful. Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan respectfully responded and quickly left. Whether it was the envoys of the Great Zhou or the officials of Dongling, they were a little curious about what the regent said to the two. Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan were both ordinary people, one was a bastard, and the other was the son of the Minister of Works. They didn't have much presence among the nobles of the imperial capital, but a few days ago, the Queen's imperial decree of marriage brought Chu Nanyi into everyone's sight. Today, the regent hosted a banquet to entertain the guests of the Great Zhou, but they were able to enter the palace openly. What did the regent say to them? Everyone was puzzled. Rong Yu's main seat was in the front. Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan deliberately knelt closer when they greeted him, so that it would be convenient for his master to speak. In addition, Rong Yu's voice was not loud, so it was normal that others didn't hear clearly. The regent looked calm, and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. The ministers couldn't help but guess that Chu Nanyi seemed to be studying medicine. Her Majesty had just given birth to the second prince, and her dragon body was weak. Did the regent want Chu Nanyi to prescribe some prescriptions to replenish Her Majesty? But Qingling medical girl is now serving Her Majesty in the Dajhan Palace, so it shouldn't be Chu Nanyi's turn to go to the palace on purpose, right? Various speculations emerged in everyone's mind, but the regent showed no emotional fluctuations, and was always indifferent and cold. Even when entertaining the Emperor of Dazhu and the envoys, he didn't show much enthusiasm. Moreover, the banquet lasted for a short time, and it was announced to be over in half an hour. The Emperor of Dazhu and the envoys came from afar, and they must be tired after the long journey. I will arrange for the guests to settle down and rest first, and I will entertain you grandly when I have time in the future. The Minister of Rights said, the regent is busy with government affairs, and I will make good arrangements for the guests. Please rest assured, Regent. This time, the guests are different from the annoying envoys from northern Xinjiang and Nanyu in the past. His Majesty the Emperor of Dazhu and the regent are relatives, so they must be treated well. Rong Yu was worried about Nan 11, so he ordered the Ministry of Rights and the Prime Minister to be responsible for the placement of Dazu Shishin, and returned to Dajhan Palace after the banquet. After Xiejin and Xian Yuanchen left the palace, they each took a carriage home to pack their luggage. As soon as Xiejin got home, he asked someone to prepare a fast horse and went straight to the military camp. When Xian Yuanyao was training soldiers on weekdays, his 18 guards performed their duties. As soon as Xiejin arrived at the military camp, the news reached Xian Yuanyao's ears. "Didn't I tell him not to come to the military camp again?" Xian Yuanyao frowned subconsciously after hearing the report. "This person doesn't understand what I said, right? If he came to him to strengthen his husband's authority last time, what did he come for this time? Are you afraid that the rumors are not boiling enough, and you want to add fuel to the fire? Mr. Xie seems to have an urgent matter." "Urgent matter?" Xian Yuanyao was suspicious and went out of the military camp himself. He saw Xiejin standing beside the horse, looking at him with a smile. Xian Yuanyao's face was full of majesty. "What do you want to see me for?" Xiejin smiled at the corner of his lips. "I came to say goodbye to you." "Say goodbye?" Xian Yuanyao's face changed slightly. "What are you saying goodbye to?" Xiejin walked up to him, hooked his shoulder with his hand, and acted like a good brother again. There were people coming and going in the military camp, and it was inappropriate to be too intimate, so it was good to be good brothers. "I'm going to Mianzhou." Xiejin lowered his voice. "Mianzhou was flooded, and the master sent Xian Yuanchen and me to control the flood and provide disaster relief, but this matter is not suitable for the public for the time being, so I came to say goodbye to you." "Mianzhou flood?" Xian Yuanyao frowned. "This is a big deal, is it serious?" "The specific situation will be clear after we understand it on the spot." Xiejin sighed. "Although I'm reluctant to part with you, but..." "What nonsense are you talking about? Business is important, why are you so hypocritical?" Xian Yuanyao frowned. "The top priority is to settle the people of Mianzhou, and put the rest aside." "I know." Xiejin nodded slowly, as if hesitating. "I want to tell you something." "What's up?" "Yao Yao, you know that you will inevitably encounter some special situations when handling cases, and too rigid a way of doing things is not suitable for me." Xiejin coughed lightly. "So if you hear any rumors in the future..." Xian Yuanyao looked at him expressionlessly. "But I can promise to stay safe for you and keep a safe distance from any woman to the maximum extent possible." Xiejin raised his hand and swore, "I will never do anything that I feel sorry for Yao Yao in the slightest, otherwise I will..." "Why are you swearing so randomly?" Xian Yuanyao pulled his hand down and glared at him fiercely. "I believe you don't dare to mess up." Xiejin hugged his face and kissed him fiercely. "I really want to fight Yao Yao for 300 rounds. Xian Yuanyao took a deep breath, suppressed his annoyance, and convinced himself that for the sake of the overall situation, he should be allowed to leave peacefully and happily. "I will miss you." Xian Yuanyao adjusted the front of his clothes. "Like a good wife and mother, pay attention to safety, and remember the Lord's warning to you before. Don't put yourself in danger. In addition to arranging the victims, be prepared. Apart from providing food for disaster relief, you can take your time with everything else, and don't put yourself in danger by jumping into trouble. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 722. Xian Yuanchen went to a restaurant and packed up a roasted chicken with honey sauce, a portion of 5-spice beef, and bought a few packs of candied snacks at the street corner. When he got home, he had a meal with his mother and Jia, and he tore off the chicken legs and gave them to his mother and wife. One said, "Jia is pregnant. You have all worked hard to take care of me these past 2 days. I am not taking care of Jia. She is clearly taking care of me. Jia has really worked hard during this period." Ms. Jiao handed the chicken legs to her son. "You have also worked hard in the court, so please make up for it. In the past 2 years, life has been more peaceful and comfortable than ever before." Jiao's complexion looked softer than before, and her eyebrows and eyes are full of the softness and tranquility of a mother. Mom, you don't have to say that. Linjia's voice was gentle, and she also gave Xian Yuanchen the chicken legs. A family should take care of each other, and if we are too clear-cut, it will be a bit unconventional. Xian Yuanchen put the chicken legs back into their bowls. This is specially bought for you to eat. Jiao smiled and gave the chicken legs to Jia. Jia is pregnant now, so she should take more supplements. Lin Jia smiled and put the chicken legs back into Jiao's bowl. My mother and husband don't treat me badly on weekdays, and they wouldn't give in for a chicken leg. Besides, my life is not bad now, and my mother herself is not pay attention to taking more supplements. Once you are in good health, your husband will feel more at ease when working in the court, and there will be no worries. The warm scene in front of Xian Yuanchen made his heart full of warmth, but after all, this was the first time to say goodbye, and there was also some reluctance. He cleared his throat and spoke seriously, Mother, Jia, the regent sent me an errand. When the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law heard this, they both looked up at him. I have to leave the capital, and it may take a few months to come back. Xian Yuanchen Jia's eyes fell on his face. I need you to pay more attention to the family, and you will have to work hard during the next period of time. It's not hard work. Lin Jia shook his head, but what errand did the regent send you? We have to keep it a secret for the time being. Xian Yuanchen looked at her apologetically. I'll try my best to come back as soon as possible. Jiao frowned, need to go somewhere far away? Well, it's quite far. Xian Yuanchen nodded, but don't worry, Mother, I am going with the 9th master of the Xie family on this trip. He makes the decision in everything, so I will follow him to practice and accumulate political achievements. That's good. Lin Jiadao, Mr. Xie is very capable and is highly regarded by the regent. Mom and I feel more at ease when you two go out together. After a pause, don't worry at home, I will take good care of mother and the child in her belly. Although Mrs. Jiao was a little reluctant to give up, her son was an official in the court, so it was not a bad thing to go out on errands, and it might become a normal thing in the future. Once the errands were done, there would be an opportunity for promotion when he came back. Moreover, the 9th master of the Xie family is also the benefactor of their mother and son, and it is really reassuring to go on errands with him. After thinking about it, she nodded slowly, let's eat. After the meal, Ms. Jiao stood up and said with a gentle smile, you and Jia have a good chat, and I'll go pack your things. Xian Yuanchen nodded, thank you, Mother. Jiao touched his head and sighed softly, my son has finally grown up. I didn't expect that he has reached the age where he can be independent. In the past, such a day was simply a luxury, and one could not even imagine that such a day would come. Xian Yuanchen also felt that it was not real, but he had adapted to it in the past 2 years. He just smiled and said nothing. The mother and son have gone through hardships and gained happiness, and they understand many things without saying them. Mrs. Jiao walked out of the room and went to her son's room to pack his clothes. Xian Yuanchen and Lin Jia said some words before leaving, and they were both reluctant to part with each other. Xian Yuanchen said, I will definitely do things well so that you can live a good life. Except what kind of nonsense is this? Lin Jia chuckled, I feel quite happy in days like this. I have never been more satisfied, which makes me feel at ease and at ease. Xian Yuanchen shook his head, it's not good enough. I know the life you lived in luxury before. Lin Jia interrupted him, good food and clothing does not mean happiness. I support your efforts in your career, but there is no need to be too impatient. Life goes by little, and I hope you will do the same. A man who is loyal to the emperor and patriotic, works conscientiously in the court, and loves the people like a son outside the court, and does everything with a clear heart. Taking too big steps is not a good thing for us, and it is easy for people to get lost. Xian Yuanchen was silent for a moment, and a warm smile appeared on the corner of his lips. I know, I will definitely keep your words in mind. This girl is good at everything. Not only is she considerate, but she is also smart and transparent. She often has free and easy thoughts that other women don't have. She doesn't pursue fame and fortune, and she doesn't compare with others. It's not like a girl of her age. Mind. However, the more this happened, the more Xian Yuanchen told himself that he must give her the best life, so that she and her mother could live a richer life, and be able to own their own mansion in a dignified manner, with access from the front door, so that she could become the matron of the house. The regent asked him and Xiejin to leave tonight, so they couldn't delay too long. Xian Yuanchen talked to Lin Jie for a while, said goodbye to his mother, and left the palace. They took a carriage to the gate of Xie's house. As soon as they got off the car, they saw Xiejin walking out of the gate. Seeing Xian Yuanchen, Xiejin raised his eyebrows slightly. Is your daughter-in-law crying? Xian Yuanchen's expression was like this. Although he has been married and has the responsibilities of a husband, and has been practicing in the government for the past 2 years, and his temperament has become calmer, he is still a little at a loss when facing Xiejin. In fact, it's not his fault. Many young masters of noble families in the imperial capital are powerless in front of Xiejin, let alone him, a bastard who has rarely been exposed to the world before. Let's take a carriage to leave the imperial capital first. Xiejin got on his own carriage and asked Xian Yuanchen to get on his carriage as well. After leaving the imperial capital, we may change horses to travel. Xian Yuanchen got on his carriage and was silent for a moment. I can't ride a horse. Xiejin raised his eyebrows and then nodded nonchalantly. I can understand it. As a bastard of the Wei Wang mansion, Xian Yuanchen's life in the Wei Wang mansion was not comfortable before. It was a great fortune to be able to study, and it was strange to have time to learn to ride a horse. Xiejin sighed lightly. It's not good for a man not to know how to ride a horse, especially in the future when he often goes out to do business. Wouldn't it be a hindrance if he doesn't know how to ride a horse? Xian Yuanchen looked apologetic. I will find a chance to learn. I'll teach you. Xiejin smiled lightly. When we get to the suburbs far away from the imperial capital, I'll have someone prepare 2 fast horses. If you have the comprehension, you can learn quickly. Xian Yuanchen nodded slowly. Thank you, Master Zhu. Xiejin smiled lightly. You're welcome. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 723. Nan 11 only slept for a short while before she woke up. Po Wen and the wet nurses had already tidied up the palace, and the little prince was also coaxed to sleep. When Rong Yu came back from Guangyang Palace, Nan 11 was talking to Yin Shuang. Yin Huang, you're not young anymore. Have you ever thought about getting married? I don't want to get married. Yin Shuang's voice was always cold, but she still maintained a respectful attitude in front of Nan 11. There is no good man in the world. Rong Yu couldn't help but pause in his footsteps as he listened. No one is good, Nan 11 laughed. She was still weak just after giving birth, but now Yin Shuang's words made her smile. You have scolded all the men in the world with just one sentence. Yin Huang said nothing. Nan 11 said, do you think the regent is not good either? The prince regent is a good man, Yin Shuang said calmly, but there is no such good man in the sky and there is no one like him in the world. He should belong to His Majesty alone. Nan 11 smiled. Prince Ji is not bad either. Prince Ji and General Chu are a perfect match. The implication is that all the good men have their names, and the rest are not good men. Nan 11 said, actually, I want to tell you that there are many good men in this world, and not all men are bad. Yin Shuang was silent for a longer time this time, and after a while she said firmly, those people are not worthy of my subordinates. Well, Nan 11 did not expect to hear such a reason, and was about to say something when she heard Yin's Huang continue, most men in the world like the daughter of Jiao Didi, and their subordinates are too delicate. If there is a quarrel in the future, the subordinates are afraid that something will happen to them. Be careful and beat him to death. Her Majesty the Queen was silent, speechless for a moment. Your Majesty, you don't have to think about your Majesty, Yin Shuang said quickly. My Majesty doesn't want to get married, let alone find a random man to marry. I will stay by your Majesty's side, protect you, and serve your Majesty all your life. She spoke so sonorously and forcefully that one could only think that she was afraid of being noticed by some man. Seeing her insistence, Nan 11 nodded slowly. If you meet a man you are willing to marry in the future, you can tell me. Yes, Yin Shuang said respectfully, thank you, your Majesty. But I'm afraid I will never meet such a man in this life. When Yin's Huang resigned, she couldn't help but glance at her hand. Who can withstand her punch? After walking out of the dormitory, he looked up and saw the regent. Yin Shuang knelt down and saluted, his face calm as usual. Rong Yu said nothing and walked directly into the bedroom. Seeing that the regent had returned so early, the palace servants who were serving in the palace all bowed and left, which was very interesting. Rong Yu walked to the bed in the inner hall and stared at Nan 11's slightly pale but smiling face, in a good mood. It's okay, the lamp was already turned on in the palace. Nan 11 leaned against the bedside and looked at him softly. Why are you back so early? Rong Yu sat down by the bed and held her hand. I don't worry about you. Just 4 words evoked all Nan 11's heartache. She held his hand with her backhand and pointed at his slender fingers with her eyes closed. I won't have children again. When it comes to her safety, he always doesn't feel safe enough. Instead of continuing to worry about having another daughter, 2 sons are actually enough. What Rong Yu needed was stability and peace of mind, and she really couldn't bear to make him fall into fear every time. Are you hungry? Nan 11 shook her head. I just had something to eat before you came back, and I'm in good spirits now. Let's chat. Rong Yu raised the corners of his lips slightly and hummed, okay. Chu Xiu and the others have been settled. Just let the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Rights be responsible for the reception, Rong Yu said softly. Chu Xiu is different from those thieves with ulterior motives in South Vietnam and northern Xinjiang, so you don't need to take it too seriously. Nan 11 nodded slowly. Yes, Chu Xiu is more worry-free. Rong Yu thought about what she just heard, and her voice became a little more playful. You want to be a matchmaker again? Nan 11 raised her eyes to look at him and smiled gently. I was a little bored when I woke up just now, so I chatted with Yin Shuang for a few words, but Yin Shuang's marriage is really not a good match. Rong Yu hummed, if she doesn't want to get married, let her do it. Most of the nuns in the palace are unmarried. Let her do it herself, Nan 11 said. Marriage is something that requires mutual consent and mutual consent. Rong Yu looked down at her palm and said nothing about the flood in Mianzhou, not wanting her to worry too much. 6 days after Xiejin and Xian Yuanchen left the imperial capital, the news about the flood in Mianzhou was presented, which terminated the vacation that the ministers had received due to the birth of Her Majesty the Queen. They did not go to court for 6 days, and this time the court was faced with such a situation. For big things, everyone has a serious expression. Her Majesty the Queen is in her confinement, and the regent is sitting alone in the court hall with a cold, distant expression and full of majesty, which invisibly increases the pressure on the ministers. It has been raining heavily in Mianzhou for half a month. The floods have broken down the river embankments. A large number of houses have been flooded. The people have become homeless and displaced. All the crops in the fields have been flooded. The losses are serious. Please make a decision to the Prince Regent. As soon as the words fell, the court suddenly fell into a solemn and heavy atmosphere. Rong Yu sat in a chair, glanced at the ministers in the palace, and said in a calm and indifferent voice, what do you think about this matter? Reporting to the Prince Regent, the disaster in Mianzhou is serious. The top priority is to resettle the victims first, and the court will allocate funds for disaster relief. Myeonjo is located in the middle and lower reaches of the Myanmar River. If the river bursts its banks, it should be a problem of the weak river banks, a minister of the Ministry of Revenue said. However, when the emperor was in power 3 years ago, he had allocated money to repair the river banks. There has been no trouble in the past 3 years. How could a flood suddenly break out? The most urgent task is not to investigate the breach of the banks, but to focus on disaster relief, Prime Minister Lu said with a frown. When the news reached the imperial capital, it had been delayed on the road for more than 10 days. During these 10 days, did the local government resettle the people? The crops and farmland were destroyed. Do the people have surplus food? Even if there is some surplus, most of the food was wasted when the houses were washed away. So I think that I should immediately order the local government to allocate grain from the granary to solve the urgent problem. I think we should investigate the disaster first, Yeshalang of the Ministry of Revenue said. What if the court allocates disaster relief funds but finds that the local government has falsely reported or concealed the news? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 724. Wrong, you didn't say anything. He just sat quietly on the king's chair, listening to the discussions among the ministers below, each holding his own opinion. Some people insist on investigating the disaster first before allocating funds for disaster relief, while others believe that the people must be settled first. Myeonjo is at least 7 or 8 days away from here. If we wait until the disaster losses are clear before allocating funds as appropriate, the people cannot afford to wait. What to do if there is a shortage of food? After a heated discussion in the hall, everyone gradually calmed down. Everyone quietly looked at the regent, who was sitting high up, and saw that he had never said a word. His noble features looked unfathomable, and they didn't know what he was thinking in his heart. The quarreling ministers all retreated to their seats, and the Prime Minister asked the regent for decision-making. Prime Minister Lu took a step forward and respectfully asked for instructions. It is urgent to find out the situation of the disaster and allocate funds for disaster relief. Please give me your instructions from the Prince Regent. Wrong, you glanced lightly. I would like to know who among the Qing family is willing to go to the disaster area to take charge of this matter. As soon as these words came out, the court fell silent for an instant. The adults who were having a heated discussion just now seemed to have suddenly become mute, and no one spoke. Natural disasters and man-made disasters are unfortunate events. The ministers present hold important positions. They should share the emperor's salary and share the emperor's worries. However, due to the inherent greed of many people, disaster relief has always been regarded as a way for some officials to make a fortune. Deo, there was a lot of oil and water during this period, and the disaster relief money sown by the court should have been used to buy grain. However, it was withheld layer by layer, from fine grain to coarse grain, from coarse grain to moldy and spoiled grain. The inferior was passed off as good, and the cheap was passed off as expensive. The people are lucky to be able to use 10% or 20% of the disaster relief money. If it were in the past, which official in the palace would not come forward and be eager to try? I fought hard to get this job to fall on my head. However, in recent years, the regent has been very aggressive in investigating corruption and cannot tolerate any scandalous things happening under his nose. At this sensitive time, who dares to involve himself easily? Even if he could restrain his greed, he could not stop the officials under him from profiting from it. The money provided by the court could not be fully implemented to the victims. It was still his own incompetence. Who can bear the charge of dereliction of duty? There is Siejin in the court, who has a sense of smell better than that of a dog. At this time, I am afraid that no one dares to take such a risk. Moreover, the disaster relief is an open matter. As long as the regent wants to investigate, he is not afraid. Can't find out. The ministers were silent, and wrong you didn't rush him, as if he was trying to test people's patience. Seeing that no one was interested in this errand, wrong Yuki said calmly, "Thank you, Chief Assistant. I'm here. Why didn't Siejin come to court?" After hearing this, all the ministers turned their heads to look at where Siejin was supposed to be standing, and as expected, they did not see Siejin. Report to the regent. Xie Xiaofu complained without changing his expression. Siejin ate something bad last night and was not feeling well all night. I took a look at him this morning. Siejin's face was pale and he looked fine. I will let him rest at home for a day, so as not to disobey the emperor and offend the emperor. Rong Yu heard the words and said calmly, "Let him enter the palace in the evening. I obey the decree." When the ministers heard this, they involuntarily breathed a sigh of relief. They were extremely lucky to have escaped this errand at this time. Sure enough, sometimes too much favor is not a good thing. As for disaster relief, I'm afraid it's really difficult to handle. It's a meritorious service, but it's really difficult to do it well. Not to mention anything else, it would be fine if the officials in Mianzhou could cooperate obediently, but if they are unwilling to cooperate, then when the sky is high and the emperor is far away, what can a mere imperial envoy do to them? Moreover, if local grain merchants take the opportunity to drive up grain prices, no matter how much disaster relief money is spent, they will not be able to satisfy the appetites of those profiteers. The chamberlain shouted, "Retreat." The ministers knelt down and worshipped. I respectfully bid farewell to the regent. May you live 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1,000 years. Rong Yu stood up and left without saying a word. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 725. The memorial about the flood in Mianzhou was presented to the emperor. When the emperor and his ministers discussed the disaster in the court, Siejin and Xian Yuanchen had already arrived at Linwuyue, a small town downstream of Mianzhou. Along the way, Xian Yuanchen thought that riding in a carriage with Siejin would make him feel uncomfortable. After all, Siejin liked to tease people. He used to talk about anything, and Xian Yuanchen, a pure boy, was often at a loss and blushed. However, Xian Yuanchen soon found that he was worrying too much. Even when they were sitting in the carriage when they just left the imperial capital, Siejin did not say anything teasing or joking. His attitude was obviously much more serious than before. He talked to him about the flood in Mianzhou, what to do after arriving in Mianzhou, what to pay attention to, and what to guard against. Xian Yuanchen suddenly realized that Siejin's ability was really not fully reflected in his temperament. What's scary about him is that he knows too much, and has too much in his head. He knows who is responsible for repairing the river bank in Mianzhou, what kind of person the governor of Mianzhou is, what his hobbies are, and even knows the situation of all the merchants in Mianzhou. And he told the plan after arriving in Mianzhou in detail along the way. Xian Yuanchen listened and couldn't help asking, "Has Zhu Ye been to Mianzhou?" "Well, no," Siejin said, "but I have other channels to learn about it." Xian Yuanchen didn't ask any more questions. Although Siejin and Xian Yuanchen were traveling light, they brought many masters with them. In addition to the 6 people selected from the Wu Pavilion, there were also subordinates summoned by Siejin along the way, and several people who received them in Mianzhou. They were all people Xian Yuanchen didn't know, but everyone was very efficient and looked particularly capable. Linwuyue was the downstream area that was most seriously flooded by the flood this time. The weather was still gloomy and rainy, without the violent storm, but the site was full of the mess after the storm. The heavy rain for several days made the road full of mud, and all the places on both sides of the street where people could hide from the rain were crowded with people, homeless, ragged, and sad and desperate. Xian Yuan Chen lifted the curtain and saw the tragic scene in front of him, and his mood became heavy. Very sad, Xiejin's voice sounded in his ears, bad weather is unavoidable, and the people are too small in the face of natural disasters. There is nothing we can do about it. Xian Yuan Chen put down the curtain and turned to look at him. Why don't we abandon the car and walk? Walk, Xiejin raised his eyebrows. Why walk? Xian Yuan Chen didn't speak. You feel sorry for them, Xiejin smiled faintly, can't bear to see them in tattered clothes, while we are dressed in brocade and riding in luxurious carriages. Xian Yuan Chen shook his head, that's not what I mean. It is precisely because they are in a terrible situation, everyone's clothes are shabby and dirty, and we are dressed in brocade and gorgeous clothes, so we can't go down, Xiejin said, because walking in front of them will be out of place. If someone sees that you are well dressed and kneels in front of you to beg for something to eat, what will you do? Xian Yuan Chen subconsciously said, you can buy some steamed buns to fill their stomachs first. Do you know how many people are here? Xiejin asked faintly. If you buy a few steamed buns for them to share, thousands of other people will come around, and we can't leave even if we want to. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 726. Xian Yuan Chen suppressed his emotions and said gently, I understand what Juyi means. The most correct thing for us to do now is to drive to the residence and settle down, understand the details of the disaster, and then formulate a detailed and reliable disaster relief plan. But this plan must be ensured that no one will destroy it. If someone makes trouble in the middle of the way, it is no joke for so many disaster victims to get in chaos. Xiejin hummed, when doing big things, you can't succumb to temporary softness. You have to consider the overall situation. We came early, and there was no big delay. Except for some people who were caught off guard and drowned by the flood, no one should have starved to death, so don't worry too much. They are short of food now, and they will definitely starve, but they won't starve to death. Xian Yuan Chen nodded and said nothing. The carriage was moving very fast. There were sallow and thin disaster victims everywhere along the street, but there was no official walking on the street. The two saw all this but were silent. Soon they arrived outside an ordinary house. The young man who came out to pick them up looked about 27 or 28 years old. He was wearing a green satin robe, with a big belly and a round waist. He looked like a Maitreya Buddha and looked like a wealthy businessman in this area. The two got off the car and followed the man into the house. Xian Yuan Chen felt something was wrong. The imperial capital was a long way away. He and Xiejin rode all the way here at full speed without any delay. If the court issued an edict, they should not arrive faster than them. Why do people in Mianzhou seem to know Xiejin? His name is Chen. Seeing Xiejin turned his head and looked at Xian Yuan Chen. You can call him Boss Chen. Xian Yuan Chen said gently, Boss Chen. I don't deserve it, Chen Xing said quickly, just call me by my name, sir. The three of them entered the house together. There were several people waiting in the house. When they saw Xiejin coming, they all bowed slightly. This is the 9th master of the Xie family from the imperial capital, Chen Xing introduced. Mr. Chu wrote to say that all supplies will be at the disposal of Mr. Xie. The relief money from the court will arrive 10 days later. Disaster relief is the most important thing right now. Everyone nodded in agreement when they heard this. On behalf of Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent, I thank you all for your cooperation. Xiejin bowed slightly. Her Majesty has ordered that the flood in Mianzhou is a disaster for the people. We must control grain merchants from taking the opportunity to raise grain prices, and prevent any officials from embezzling disaster relief funds to avoid making the people's plight worse. After the people are settled, the river bank will be reinforced. This money will also be allocated by the court, so you don't have to worry. Paused. In addition, the regent said that although we cannot take the opportunity to raise grain prices, as long as the grain merchants cooperate with the court in disaster relief, the relief money allocated by the court will be paid to you at twice the previous price. We will never let you suffer any losses, and we will not let you work in vain. Hearing this, several people in the room said they dared not to. Natural disasters and man-made disasters are inevitable, but the Emperor's grace is the welfare of the people. A middle-aged man said, "It is our duty to cooperate with disaster relief." "Thank you, Mr. Xie, for your kind words." "That's right. Her Majesty cares about the people of the world. It is a blessing for the common people to be able to earn a small amount of money in a peaceful and prosperous era to support their families. The whole family lives a stable and comfortable life. It is all because of Her Majesty's grace. It is a blessing for the common people to be able to do something for Her Majesty now. I dare not take the opportunity to earn talents that I don't deserve. The price of grain should be what it is. There is no need to raise it twice." Xiejin smiled calmly. "The double price was set by Her Majesty. It has nothing to do with me, and I can't make the decision." Other grain merchants could only agree when they heard it. Xian Yuanchen listened silently. No matter what he thought in his heart, his face remained calm and he didn't ask easily. "Mr. Xie, you must be very tired after the long journey. I will have someone take you two to settle down first, have dinner, and have a good rest for the night." Chen Xing said, "Let the bosses arrange other things first." Xiejin nodded. So the bosses left one after another. Chen Xing's expression became serious. "The grain merchants in the neighboring towns have been in close contact with the prefect these 2 days. Some gave silver, some gave calligraphy and paintings, and some even gave beauties directly. If you come 2 days later, the people's plight will be aggravated, and the grain merchants in the neighboring towns will start to raise the price." Xian Yuanchen's heart sank slightly. Xiejin nodded calmly, "I understand. You follow the plan. Tomorrow morning, distribute porridge and steamed buns at the entrances of various towns and streets, twice a day, to help the people overcome the difficulties in front of them." Yes, Chen Xing nodded, "But the flood came suddenly, and the rice hoarded by those bosses just now is limited, and it can't last for a few days. The total population of the towns in Mianzhou is more than 100,000, and the number of people affected is as much as half. Those unscrupulous grain merchants hold on to the grain and only rely on these few people just now. Even if there is more grain in the granary, it will be consumed quickly. This is also the reason why other grain merchants have been actively arranging for the governor in the past 2 days. They are collecting grain from all over the place and hoarding it. They plan to wait a few days and sell the rice to the people at several times the price when the time is right, and wait for them to get rich." Xiejin said, "Chu Nanyi has already allocated grain from other places, and it will arrive soon." Chen Xing was relieved. "Yes, I will do it now." Dollar window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 727. Chen Xing arranged for someone to take them back to their room to rest. Xian Yuanchen simply freshened up, then turned around and went to Xiejin's room, 9 Masters. Xiejin was sitting at the table reading a file. When he saw him coming in, he just said casually, "Sit down." Xian Yuanchen sat down opposite him and looked at Xiejin quietly. He had many questions in his heart but didn't know where to start. This disaster relief was a little different from what he expected. "Do you have any questions to ask me?" Seeing his silence, Xiejin raised his head and glanced at him. "If you have any questions, it doesn't hurt to ask." Master Chu is also coming here. Have these grain merchants here made arrangements in advance? Xian Yuan Chen was puzzled, but how could they agree to cooperate with us so easily? What is the attitude of the local government? Do these people know Master Zhu? Xiejing closed the file, clapped his hands and poured himself a cup of tea. Businessmen all over the world are profit-seeking. Some people will destroy their conscience for money, and some people will do anything for profit. However, there are still people who pursue money and profit but are also afraid of death. There are also some people have enough brains and retain the most basic conscience and principles. Xian Yuan Chen said nothing. The grain merchants just now are old and young. Although they are doing business to make money, the lives of their families are more important to them. If there is a dead end, they have to obey. Xian Yuan Chen nodded slowly, but these principles are easy to say, but some people don't buy them. Everyone understands the truth, but there are actually many obstacles behind obedience. If nothing else, just taking the initiative to take out the food in one's own granary to cooperate with disaster relief and distribute steamed buns and rice porridge to the people, this violates the rules between businessmen. If there is a tacit understanding, they will definitely be dissatisfied and criticized by other grain merchants, who think that these bosses have destroyed their common interests. They may form some grudges in the business field in the future and be waited for opportunities for revenge. Businessmen are a community of interests. This is an unwritten rule between them. Those who take the initiative to break the contract at this time will usually not have good results. There are all kinds of people in the world, some are good and some are evil, some are smart and some are stupid, and so are businessmen. Xiejin took a sip of tea and smiled casually. We will ignore those people who don't buy it for the time being. You can start with some people who are willing to buy it. As long as some people are willing to cooperate, the current dilemma can be easily solved. In a few days, the imperial envoys for disaster relief will arrive in Mianzhou, and then all the problems can be solved. Imperial envoy, Xian Yuan Chen was surprised. Are there any other officials coming? The two of us are imperial envoys. Xiejing glanced at him, but the officials in Mianzhou don't know we are coming yet. According to their expectations, it will take at least 10 days for Her Majesty the Queen to send people over to provide relief. Time, so they will count the days, wait for the documents to be sent, and make all arrangements before the imperial envoy arrives. Xian Yuan Chen immediately understood his words, and even more clearly understood the regent's foresight, sitting in the palace, calmly making decisions about the situation thousands of miles away, as if all relevant personnel were under his control, planning the layout. It's so perfect and meticulous, it's really shocking. Xiejin said, go and rest early. We don't have anything to do tonight. Xian Yuan Chen nodded, stood up and left. The next plan was under control. Chen Xing arranged for all the people under his command to recruit cooks and cooks overnight and disperse them in various towns. They began to wash rice, make porridge, and mix noodles to make steamed buns. Several small towns were mobilized, and they started giving out porridge and steamed buns on the streets early the next morning. The people on both sides of the street thought they had heard wrong and swarmed in like crazy. The women holding their children were obviously at a disadvantage. In the chaotic scene, there was pushing and wrestling, and the children cried fiercely. The scene was almost a mess. A pot of porridge. The people are so hungry. They finally have food. Who can control it? I'm afraid that if I take one step slowly, I'll be snatched away. The chaotic scene was quickly stopped by a group of officers and soldiers holding swords. Don't rush. Don't run around. Don't crowd. There's a lot of porridge and a lot of steamed buns. Everyone, line up, take your time, receive one by one, everyone has something. There is no food in the crowd. If you are hungry, don't blame my master for being cruel. Come here. Arrest anyone who dares to push and bump around. Mr. Chen felt sorry for everyone's hunger. He cooked several large pots of porridge overnight and steamed a lot of steamed buns for everyone. You should all be obedient and line up. Those who don't want to queue will not get the steamed buns and porridge, and will be arrested. So everyone, please be honest and quiet. Under the menacing scoldings of the officers and soldiers, the situation slowly came under control. People lined up in 2 long lines, quietly waiting for a warm meal. Xiejin stood on the 2nd floor of Chen's courtyard, watching the scene in front of him without saying a word. When order was completely under control, he turned around and walked down. Let's go look elsewhere. Xianyu and Chen followed him and asked in a low voice, if those grain merchants are dissatisfied with this, will they soon launch an attack? That's inevitable, Xiejin hummed, but you don't have to worry, there will be someone to deal with it. Yes. After leaving the door, Xiejin and Xianyu and Chen got into the carriage and headed to the neighboring town. The flooding situation in Anhe town is also very serious, but it is slightly better than Linwu. The river water in the streets has receded, and less than half of the houses in the town have collapsed. The villages below are almost destroyed. The hot porridge and steamed buns led by the Chen family branch it is also being distributed in an orderly manner. Officers and soldiers along the street suppress the protesters with force and maintain the most basic order. If Lords his who disagrees, the grain merchants should not have the right to mobilize troops. Xianyu and Chen frowned. How did Master Zhu make these officers and soldiers willingly obey orders? Although they wear the clothes of officers and soldiers, they are not real officers and soldiers, Xiejin said, they are very skilled guards. Guard? Whose bodyguard? Those grain merchants' homes. Doubts arose in Xianyu and Chen's mind, and when he looked at the guards wearing uniforms of officers and soldiers, the strange feeling came to mind again. Xiejin took Xianyu and Chen around 2 or 3 towns, and a day passed like this. Continue the next day. After 2 days of this, someone really made a fuss. Yu Zhong, the governor of Mianzhou, called all the grain merchants in Mianzhou together and sternly questioned Chen Xing, I have not yet formulated a rigorous disaster relief plan. Why did Boss Chen make the decision without authorization? Chen Xing showed an unbearable look on his face, I really can't bear to see the people being tortured by hunger. The adults are okay, but those children are so pitiful. I'm worried that if this continues, the people will do something irrational when they are extremely hungry. It is also the government's responsibility to be irrational. What does it have to do with Boss Chen? Other grain merchants took advantage of this and asked, does Boss Chen know the consequences of doing this? What are the consequences? Of course, the grain purchased by other grain merchants at high prices from elsewhere was piled up in the warehouse and could not be sold. The floods in Mianzhou directly caused a sharp increase in grain prices in the neighboring states and counties. Some bosses were hoarding grains but refused to sell them. In order to hoard more grains as soon as possible, grain merchants in Mianzhou had no choice but to buy them at high prices. If they couldn't sell them in the end, if you drop it in your hand, you will die. Don't worry, bosses. There isn't a lot of food in the Chen family's warehouse. It's been too hard for the people like Lianzhou this time. I just want to do a good deed. Chen Xing said sincerely, matching his chubby body and the Maitreya Buddha-like face seems to be somewhat reliable. Bosses, you probably don't want the people to starve to death, right? With more people, food can be sold better. If most of the people starve to death, who else can you sell your food to? I almost believed what Boss Cheng said. Boss Yu said coldly, man and money die, and birds die for food. The Chen family's great business can withstand consumption, but for the more than 100,000 people in Mianzhou, this ration is not small. Number. Yes, if you really give alms for 3 days, the Chen family's grain depot cannot afford it. Boss Wang frowned, why are you doing this? If you say it is unprofitable, we don't really believe it. Chen Xing walked to use his whose side, lowered his voice and said, Sir, I am doing this all for your reputation. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 728. Yu Zhong frowned, for my own sake. Yes, Chen Xin nodded. You have forgotten that the imperial court will send an imperial envoy here soon. If the imperial envoy sees the people on the street crying from hunger, but the government does nothing. Use his who was startled and suddenly woke up. In the past 2 days, he had only been dealing with grain merchants, but he had forgotten about the imperial envoys who came to provide disaster relief. It's not that he doesn't take the imperial envoy to heart, but he always thinks that the time is enough. He only needs to let the grain merchants store the grain before the imperial envoy arrives, close the granary before the imperial envoy arrives, and then have a drink with the imperial envoy and test it out. After you get over your attitude, you can do what you like. But he forgot that if too many people starve to death or there is another plague or something, the people will cause trouble and the government will be in trouble. Besides, if the imperial envoy is sent by the imperial court to provide disaster relief, he will definitely allocate money. Chen Xin lowered his voice. By then, Your Excellency has gained a good reputation, and the imperial envoy will definitely feel that you love the people like your own children, so the disaster relief funds will still be left to you, Your Majesty responsible. When Yu Zhong heard that it made sense, he twirled his beard and said, You are right. That. However, worry soon appeared on Yu Zhong's face. What should the Zone family do? Zone family? Chen Xin fell silent. Forget it, I'll go tell them, Yu Zhong said. The Zone family should be able to understand. 2 more days passed quickly. Porridge giving is still going on in various towns, twice a day. The people are obviously in better spirits than before. Just because the porridge and steamed buns made by Bulletin are made of high-quality white rice and white flour, even if they are not victims of the disaster, they also came and queued up to receive food, which at one time caused crowds of people, food shortages, and almost caused conflicts. It is the nature of ordinary people to love to take advantage of others. If you take advantage of the officials, you will save your own. Moreover, life will not be easy for anyone after the disaster. Some houses have not been destroyed and there is still a surplus of food. After the disaster, there is also a saving. No matter how much you save, you are worried that food prices will rise and you won't be able to afford it. Xiejin sent people to visit various towns in case anyone got sick at this time, but his identity has not yet been exposed, and some obvious things cannot be done yet, such as mobilizing officers and soldiers to set up tents so that the people have a place to stay. The most important thing to guard against after a major disaster is the plague. If too many people die, the plague can easily cause widespread infection. Fortunately, Xiejin came early and took precautions. No seriously ill people have been found yet, even if there are, it was in the past. I am just sick, and it has only become more serious due to the disaster in the past 2 days. Xiejin sent people to find several doctors with superb medical skills, and they gathered in a large drugstore on the street to conduct consultations. All sick people had their pulses checked for free and medicines were given free of charge. Of course, the cost of these medicines and diagnosis and treatment fees were also paid by the court. The weather is getting hotter and the summer season has officially entered. The imperial document was finally sent to the Yamen of Mianzhou Prefecture. When Yu Zhi saw the contents of the document, his expression suddenly changed. Seeing this, the master asked in confusion, Sir, what's wrong? What day is today? May 15th. The document says that the imperial envoy will leave in late April. When the master heard this, his expression changed. It's impossible, isn't it? Your Excellency's notes were only submitted at the end of April, how come they arrived so soon? Yu Zhi, who looked a little unhappy, do you know who the imperial envoy is? Who? Thank you to Xiejin, the legitimate son of the first assistant family. The master was puzzled, what's so special about this person? Yu Zhi, who spoke in a deep tone, he is the legitimate son of Xie Xiaofu. He is now the favorite of the queen and the regent. It was in his hands that the Shangningyun clan was destroyed. When the master heard this, his expression suddenly changed. What should we do? Use his who put down the documents and looked up at the gloomy sky outside. I will go to the Zone family to see how the Zone family plans to deal with this person. It would be good if he could bribe him, otherwise he would have to. There was a bit of murderous intent in his eyes, and he obviously meant to silence him. The master immediately understood, so it seems that it was his idea to give out porridge and steamed buns for the past 2 days. He is very kind at such a young age. It's a pity that he didn't act very smartly. He offended all the grain merchants in order to distribute porridge. When the time came, all the major merchants in Mianzhou united. He, an imperial envoy who came from afar, really thought that he could handle the disaster relief with just a talisman. This thing? It's useless to be kind in disaster relief. Use his who snorted coldly. He also needs to be a good person. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 729. I was busy for 4 consecutive days, giving porridge to the victims, personally inspecting the river embankments, and inspecting the flooded houses of the people. After the flood slowly receded, the flooded villages and towns were in urgent need of reconstruction, and the follow-up was a big project. However, when the two returned, they unexpectedly found that officers and soldiers on both sides of the street had begun setting up tents for the victims. Is this what Master Zhu means? Xian Yuanchen was surprised. Xiejin shook his head slowly, and the smile on his lips was clear. No. Xian Yuanchen had a strange look on his face. What did the government do? It seems that the documents from the imperial court have been received, Xiejin said calmly. Xian Yuanchen was even more surprised when he heard this, but it shouldn't be that fast. When the documents come out is the Lord's decision. If he wants to go 2 days faster, he can go 2 days faster, and if he wants to go 2 days slower, he can go 2 days slower. Xiejin turned around and walked towards his residence. It is important to investigate the case, but we can't delay the people's livelihood, so the paperwork shouldn't be delayed for too long. But even so, the Mianzhou government was still caught off guard. Now those people were already panicking, and they were probably thinking of remedial measures and discussing countermeasures. The best example of this was the officers and soldiers setting up tents in a hurry. Xian Yuanchen said nothing and followed Xiejin silently, but his heart was shocked. Is the regent really capable of reaching heaven? Returning to the Chen family's house, Xiejin was about to step across the threshold when Chen Xing hurriedly walked out. Seeing Xiejin, his eyes lit up. Master Xie, I have been looking for you everywhere, but you are finally back. What's wrong? Use his who went to the Zone family. The Zone family is gathering all the food at the Zone family, Chen Xing said. Masters his who ordered the officers and soldiers of the government office to start spreading out to build tents for the homeless victims in various towns. These tents have been ordered long ago. They originally planned to take it out for show before the imperial envoy came, but they didn't expect the imperial envoy to arrive earlier than they expected. Now they were a little panicked, and even the grain merchants planned to take out the grain and sell it. Don't worry, Xiejin walked into the yard with steady steps. It's a good thing that they are willing to make amends now, at least they are willing to show off. Chen Xing was not so optimistic. It's a good thing to show off, but the Mianzhou grain merchants obey the Zone family's words, and the Zone family doesn't know what they will do next. The three of them entered the room together and sat down on their chairs. The servants served tea and then left. We don't need to worry about them for the time being, Xiejin smiled lightly. The imperial envoy has arrived, and the disaster relief materials sent by the imperial court have also arrived. The next step is to resettle the people, build houses, build river embankments, and let the government draw up a list. Distribute relief money according to the household registration statistics of the government. These are what the government should take the initiative to do. I believe that use his who would not dare to cheat here. Xian Yuan Chen didn't say anything, just sat aside and listened to Xiejin's words. He found that Xiejin really knew a lot of things. He was clearly such a young man, and he was an aristocratic son born in Jingxiaduai. He was used to living a life of fine clothes and fine food. His ability to maneuver in the court could be said to be due to his background. As a result, going to Shangning to handle the case can be said to be strategic and outstanding. But as a native of the imperial capital, he should have never been exposed to the lives of the lower class people. However, he was able to handle disaster relief at ease. He knew better than the local government what the people needed after the disaster, and he even did more. Thorough and reliable. Disaster relief has become a battle of wits and courage with the government and grain merchants. What kind of person is he? Assign a few more people to keep an eye on everything, Xiejin said, just watch. Leave the main matters to the government, so we don't need to interfere. The most difficult days have passed, and the people have been suffering from hunger for a few days after the disaster. The aftermath of the disaster should be made clear and follow the rules. What the government needs to do is to resettle the people, even if it is just to do some work. Show it to the imperial envoy that they must also do their best. Xiejin's next task is to investigate private matters. Ye Chenxing nodded, I'll make arrangements right away. Xian Yuan Chen, you go with Chenxing, Xiejin ordered, it will be good for you to see more about people's livelihood. Xian Yuan Chen nodded, stood up and left with Chenxing. Xiejin sat alone in the room drinking tea. After drinking the tea, he took a nap. He was thinking about how long it would take for things in Mianzhou to end. When he went back, he would definitely try to get a few more days off with his master, so as to have a good time with Yao Yao. Warm and warm. Xian Yuan Chen and Chenxing walked outside for a long time. On the way, they saw a scene of desperate victims selling their daughters on the street. After asking, Chenxing explained, although the disaster relief has started in the past 2 days, the collapsed buildings after the disaster have building a house is not something that can be completed in a day or two. The crops are all rotting in the ground. There will be no harvest this year. If everything goes well next month, we can plant rice. We will have to wait until at least autumn before we can harvest the food. In the past few months, many families will have a difficult time, and those with many children will have no choice but to sell their daughters to tide over the current difficulties. Xian Yuan Chen frowned, since the imperial court has sent imperial envoys to take charge of disaster relief, and after the household registration is completed, money will be distributed to help them temporarily tide over the difficulties. How could they be reduced to selling their daughters to make a living? Chenzingdao, after a major disaster, food is usually soaring. Grain merchants take the opportunity to hoard food and sell it at high prices later. Even if the court distributes food according to the ordinary family's 6-month expenditure standard, it will not be able to withstand the cost of food after the skyrocketing. Xian Yuan Chen remained silent. According to the current grain price, a bucket of rice costs 15 cash, and 1 tael of silver is enough to support a family of 5 until the autumn harvest, Chenxing said, but if the grain price rises sharply, a bucket of rice costs 50 cash, or even 100 cash. There will be very little food that can be bought with 2 taels of silver, and many people know that the price of food will definitely rise after the disaster. They know it in their hearts, so they know that the few taels of silver distributed by the court will not be able to support the autumn harvest season. Xian Yuan Chen was silent for a while and then said, so controlling food prices is the top priority. Chenxing nodded, yes. Now Mr. Chu is mobilizing grain from all sides. Several bosses that Mr. Xian Yuan met before will accept these grains and fill their own granaries with enough to cope with the next few months. After that, we can control grain prices so that merchants who take advantage of the opportunity to stock up on grains and sell them at high prices will be unable to sell grains and will eventually have to sell them at lower prices. Only in this way can the problem of skyrocketing grain prices be solved. Xian Yuanchen let out a sigh of relief. These words sound simple, but a Mianzhou city with hundreds of thousands of people needs a huge amount of food. Whether it is Chu Nanyi mobilizing food from various places, or Xiejin secretly contacting these bosses to control food prices, it is definitely not the same. It was a simple matter. Although this decision protected the people's livelihood, it directly harmed the interests of those profiteers. How could they let it go? What seems to be a disaster relief act dedicated to the court and the people, but there are also many unknown secrets hidden in it. After wandering around outside for a day, they returned to Chen's house in the evening. Xian Yuanchen and Xiejin had dinner together and were about to discuss what they had seen and heard during the day when someone outside reported, "Master Xie, the young master of the Zone family wants to see you." Xian Yuanchen was stunned. "Young master of the Zone family? The real master has come forward." Xiejin smiled, and under the light of the lights, his handsome features were filled with boundless elegance. "If my prediction is correct, he should be the youngest master of the Zone family." The servant replied, "Young master Xie guessed correctly, he is the young master of the Zone family." Xian Yuanchen frowned. "Who is the young master of the Zone family?" Beauty Xiejin raised his lips carelessly. "The Zone family is really willing to spend a lot of money, and is willing to give away their own blood. It is exactly what they said, 'I can't bear to let the child catch the wolf.' I admire you." Xian Yuanchen heard the meaning of his words and was startled. "Young Master Zone's purpose of coming here is?" "As you think in your heart," Xiejin said in a lazy voice, "I'm here to sacrifice myself." Xian Yuanchen's expression slightly condensed. "Akin, do you know what it means to do what you want?" Xiejin pointed outside. "The Zone family is very powerful and controls almost all the forces in this area, whether it's merchants like the Chen family, Zhang family, or the Yu family. The official family is controlled by the Zone family, both covertly and covertly." Xian Yuanchen was shocked when he heard this. "Emperor?" "Yes, it's the two emperors." Xiejin adjusted his position to a comfortable position. "The Zone family has a big business and great influence, so they will definitely have many eyes and eyes. If they know who the imperial envoy is here, they can then prescribe the right medicine. A few months ago, Her Majesty the Queen granted a special marriage. Because the two people being married were both men, it was instantly known to the world. Looking at the Dongling world, who doesn't know that the ninth master of the Xie family loves men?" Xian Yuanchen pursed his lips, not knowing how to answer this question. "Let Master Zone come in," Xiejin said, and said to Xian Yuanchen, "You should avoid it first." He said and pointed to the bed in the inner room. Xian Yuanchen was a little embarrassed and didn't know how to deal with the next scene. Hearing this, he breathed a sigh of relief. He got up and walked into the inner room, lay down on the bed and lowered the bed curtain. "For a moment, I forgot that lying in bed was actually not a suitable decision. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 730. The young master of the Zone family just turned 17, and his name is Zone Yishang. Just by hearing this name, you know that he should be a beauty. Feathered clothes and gorgeous clothes can only match a beauty. After entering, I found that she is indeed a beauty, with a slender figure, a soft and gentle face, and a pair of exquisite eyes emitting a sharp light. She looks very clean, beautiful but not coquettish, and makes people feel good at first sight. "Thank you, young master." Zone Yuchang bowed gracefully and calmly. "Yuchang greets you." Xiejin raised his eyes nonchalantly, his eyes slightly bright, with obvious surprise in his eyes. "Young master Zone." "Yes." The young man bowed his head humbly. "I am Zone Yuchang." "You look good." Xiejin was generous with his praise. "Why did you come to see me?" The young man was silent for a moment, then raised his eyes slightly to look at Xiejin, and a light arc appeared at the corner of his beautiful lips. The prefect ordered me to come and serve you. Serve. Xiejin picked up the teacup and sipped the fragrant tea elegantly. His voice was lazy and lazy, revealing a bit of bewitching. How to serve. Zhou Yucheng understood that this was an attitude of tacit consent. So he took a step and slowly walked to Xiejin, and his flowing robe exuded a moving color as he moved. When he stood in front of Xiejin, the young man lowered his eyes, and his watery eyes looked at Xiejin docilely. Xiejin smiled lazily, just looking at him calmly. The boy slowly knelt down in front of Xiejin and reached out to untie Xiejin's belt. The boy's hands were slender and white, like beautiful top-grade white jade, without a single flaw. But when these hands reached Xiejin's waist, they were stopped by a teacup. The boy raised his eyes and looked into Xiejin's eyes. Sir. Under close observation, the boy's appearance was even more beautiful, with a pair of beautiful eyes that seemed to be able to speak, and his pink lips were lightly pursed into a line, looking a little nervous, but also a little gentle and harmless. The jade-like face was faintly flushed, spreading all the way to the ears, making people love it no matter how they looked at it. Xiejin couldn't help but smile. The head of the Zone family is very capable. He gave me such a big gift right away. I am really afraid that I am not worthy of it. Zone Yushang said, it is my blessing to serve Master Xie. Xiejin smiled faintly. Young Master Zone, do you think this action is appropriate? Nothing is inappropriate. Zone Yushang lowered his eyebrows and said meekly, as long as Master likes it, I can do anything. Anything is okay. Xiejin raised his eyebrows. Are you serious? Zone Yushang nodded. Xian Yuan Chen was lying on the bed in the inner room, and he heard the conversation between the two people outside clearly. He felt like sitting on pins and needles for a while. Oh no, like sleeping on pins and needles. His cheeks were hot, and he wanted to disappear from this room immediately. Xiejin sighed, not knowing whether it was a sigh or a mockery. The head of the Zone family is really willing to give up his own children. The Zone family has many children, they are not worth much. Zone Yucheng's voice was particularly pleasant, pure like a deer. If you can be loved by the young master, it is the blessing of Yucheng for 3 lifetimes. Xiejin leaned against the back of the chair, hooked his chin with his slender fingers, and slowly forced him to raise his face. You just said that the Zone family has many children, I wonder how many there are. The voice was lazy, as if he was quite interested in this question. Zone Yucheng behaved very well and answered every question. If we talk about grandfather, grandfather has 4 sons, eldest uncle has 4 sons and 3 daughters, second uncle has 1 son and 2 daughters, my father has 4 sons, and younger uncle has 2 sons and 2 daughters. In terms of direct lineage, grandfather has 11 grandsons and 7 granddaughters. Indeed, there are many. Xiejin raised his eyebrows. It sounds like there are more descendants than the Xie family. Grandfather also has 5 daughters, who married into 5 families respectively. These 5 families are all dependent on the Zone family. Zone Yucheng continued, so grandfather also has 11 grandchildren and granddaughters. Xiejin hummed, it really has achieved the goal of spreading branches and leaves, and the descendants are continuous. So what he said about children being worthless makes sense, especially for people like the head of the Zone family. The weight of descendants in his heart is obviously not as important as the interests of the family, so grandchildren can also be regarded as a gift of cooperation. Zone Yucheng knelt quietly, with an extremely docile posture. So was it the prefect who sent you here, or your grandfather who asked you to come here? It was the idea of my grandfather and the prefect. Well, it's a pity that the sincerity is not enough. Xiejin curled his lips, and his voice became more charming. It's true that Master Zhu likes beautiful women, but he doesn't just like beautiful boys. He also likes girls. Your sisters, well, if you don't have biological sisters, cousins are fine. Is there anyone whose beauty can be compared with yours? Zone Yucheng's expression was slightly stiff, Master Jew means. The ancients often said that sisters share the same husband. Today, Master Jew also wants to try the taste of brother and sister sharing the same husband. It should be particularly ecstatic. Siejin smiled. What do you think of this idea, Master Zone? Zone Yachane's face was slightly pale. I don't know if it was because of the humiliation and embarrassment that made him bite his lips lightly, his eyebrows drooped, his long eyelashes trembled slightly, and a pitiful posture instantly appeared in front of him, making people unable to restrain their heartbeats and love. Siejin sighed, it's really pitiful to see a beauty so weak. Never mind, I won't make it difficult for you. Stay by my side and serve me for the time being. Leave the daughter of the Zone family aside. Zone Yushang pursed her lips and whispered, thank you, sir. Go take a shower and change clothes, Siejin ordered. I like clean children. Yes. Zone Yushang stood up and looked at Siejin hesitantly. I didn't bring any clothes. Looking at your figure, my clothes don't suit you, Siejin said calmly. I'll give you an hour to go back and pack some clothes. You don't need too many. If you need anything in the future, I'll buy it for you when I have time. Zone Yachane nodded gently, yes. Thank you, sir. Siejin reminded, don't delay too long, I want you to serve me tonight. Yes, Zone Yachane responded with lowered eyebrows and eyes. Without any reluctance, Yachane will leave first, and I will come back to serve you within an hour. Siejin said, go. Zone Yachane bowed, and even the posture when she turned around and walked out was so elegant that it was impeccable. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix.